Riveting. The kids are super excited. You all have a little pad to draw on. So that's where you can take notes at, kids. That's where you can draw along with your notes. And everybody's sitting up close to me. I don't know if you can tell this online or not, but there are millions of people gathered in the room today. Just like I'm sure there are millions of people gathered online watching along. So, no, I'm excited this morning where we're at in we've been walking through the series Heart to Heart. And today I want us to think about a couple of different things. I want us to think about signs that we're going to start. And then I want us to think about sight and blindness. Okay? Sight and blindness. All right, so first the signs, all right? Kids, you have your notepad in front of you. I'm going to challenge you, draw a sign. Think about the most memorable, noticeable. Think about the different signs you see. We're a people and a culture of signs, and I don't mean like signs of alien life or anything like that. What I mean is that from the earliest age, even as a kid, you begin to recognize and associate signs with responses. A stop sign. Somebody name another sign. Kids, what's another sign you think of when you think of a sign? You just think of a sign? What sign? Think of a sign. Yeah, Ruben. Chick-fil-A. That was the one I'd hoped somebody would name. Chick-fil-A sign, right? It's super noticeable. A yield sign, a stop sign, right? What are some other signs? Grayson, what's a sign? Do you have signs in your classroom, Grayson? Do you have a stop sign in your classroom? To stop the traffic in the hallway or when you come in? I can't see that one. Route 66. No. +1. An arrow sign, like a direction. You're like, go this way or don't go that way. Like in front of your house, there's like a do not enter sign, right, on one of those little pass-throughs. People do it all the time, I'm sure. Yes? McDonald's, the Golden Arches. Huh? I-35, Interstate 35. What's that? Yeah. Oh, exit 35. A hospital sign. What about, is anybody on road trips? Anybody else on road trips? Do you play the sign game, like the alphabet, A through Z game? Yes? Yes. We have there are times when we go through where like, okay, you can be on a screen for a little while, and then we hit a major city, and I'm like, all right, screens away, hurry, put screens away, like, all right, ready, A, here we go, A, B, C, and we play the game in the car. Welcome to Color for Colorado. That's a sign, one of our favorites as well. Signs elicit a response. They're meant to prompt us to be aware of something, to direct our attention, or to change, or maybe they're again, meant to guide us to something, help us to understand. Would you agree that some signs are more obvious than others? We have a sign at our house as well that every time we see a Volkswagen Beetle, Ellie and I punch one another. We play slug bug. That's a sign for us, right? Have you ever seen this sign where someone does like this, holds their finger like this, and you have to put your finger in the hole if you see it? Yeah, you have to break it, and then they get to punch you if you don't make it fast enough, right? Or slap in the neck. Okay, so there's lots of little variations to those signs around that, right? Some signs are more obvious than others, and sometimes we still, home sweet home. Directional signs, if you've ever been in a major city, directional signs can be easy to miss when you get in the middle of real quick, got to be off here, off there, take this direction, go this way. It can be confusing. Well, today, we're looking at John chapter 9. We've been kind of walking along with the lectionary for the last couple of year or so. And today's passage is John chapter 9. And this is a sign, one of the signs recorded in the Gospels. And it's going to be probably a familiar one. And so I want to set a little bit of context and where this sign sort of sits in the list of signs that Jesus has done and pointed to a few things. John chapter 2, water to wine was a sign. In John chapter 4, Jesus heals a royal official's son from a distance. He doesn't even have to go to the son, but that the royal official comes to him and is like, I believe in that Jesus, I think you can heal him from here. And Jesus heals the guy's son. There's the healing of the paralytic in chapter 5. There's the feeding of the 5,000, which would have been an incredible sign to witness and to see. Chapter 6, Jesus walks on water. Thank you. John chapter 9, where we're going to be at today, is a man born blind. And then John chapter 11 is a little guy named Lazarus, where Jesus brings Lazarus back to life. These are some of the different, and there are many other signs in the gospel in the New Testament. And there were even signs that the church, that the people of God performed to display God's power. But these weren't just displays of God's power, but they were meant to bring about a deeper understanding of who Jesus, or even those of us who call ourselves followers of Jesus, who we really are. So John chapter 9, where we're going to be at today, is a sign about sight, okay? But there's a twist to the story. If you have taken notes with this, there's a twist to the story, and the twist to the story is this. The man who can't see ends up seeing clearly, and the people who can see end up blind spiritually. So again, if you're taking notes, this is the first thing in the line. The man who can't see ends up seeing clearly, and the people who can see end up blind spiritually. Okay? So again, I mentioned we're going to talk about spiritually. You'll understand in just a minute. Okay, so we've been in this series talking about heart to heart, looking at Jesus' encounters, these kind of one-on-one conversations with individuals that help bring to them an awareness of who God is and what he desires to do, a way for God to reveal something about himself and to meet their deepest longings, their needs, okay? So I'm going to read all of John chapter 9. It's like 41 verses, so I'm going to invite you to hang on to this, and then we're going to just kind of walk through and look at a couple of 41. Thank you, Grayson. We're going to walk through this passage of Scripture, this story today. So John chapter 9, if you have a Bible and want to follow along, you're in the room or online. It'll be on the screens as well. Hear these words today from John chapter 9, a familiar story too, probably for many of us. As he went along, that's Jesus, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" "Neither, though. This man nor his parents sinned," said Jesus. "But this happened so that the work of God might be displayed in his life. As long as it is day, we must do the work of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world." And having said this, he spit on the ground, making some mud with the saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. "Go," he told him, "and wash in the pool of Siloam." This word means sent. So the man went, and he washed, and he came home seeing. His neighbors and those who had formerly seen him begging asked, "Isn't this the man who used to sit and beg?" Some claimed that he was. Others said, "No, he only looks like him." But he himself insisted, "I am the man." "How then are your eyes open?" they demanded. He replied, "The man they called Jesus made some mud and put it on my eyes. He told me to go to Siloam and to wash. So I went and washed, and then I could see." "Where is this man?" they asked him. "I don't know," he said. All right, let's take a deep breath together. There's 12 verses. We got another 30 to go. They brought to the Pharisees the man who had been blind. Now the day on which Jesus had made the mud and opened the eyes of the man was a Sabbath. Everybody say tisk, tisk. That was okay. It's all right. I know that's a weird phrase. Jesus healed on the Sabbath, okay? So be attention to that. Therefore, the Pharisees asked him, how had he received his sight? "He put mud on my eyes," the man replied, "and I washed, and now I see." Some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath." But others asked, "How can a sinner do such a miraculous sign?" So they, that is the Pharisees, were divided. And finally, they turned again to the blind man. "What have you to say about him? If your eyes have been, it was your eyes he opened." The man replied, "He is a prophet." The Jews still did not believe that he had been blind and had received a sight until they sent for the man's parents. "Is this your son?" they asked him. "Is this the one you say was born blind? How is it that he can now see?" "We know he is our son," the parents answered, "and we know he was born blind, but how he can see now, or who opened his eyes, we do not know. Ask him. He is of age. He will speak for himself." His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jews, for already the Jews had decided that anyone who acknowledged that Jesus was the Christ would be put out of the synagogue. This was why his parents said, "He is of age, ask him." A second time they summoned the man again who had been blind. "Give glory to God," they said. "We know this man is a sinner." And he replied, "Whether he is a sinner or not, I do not know. But one thing I do know, I was blind, but now I see." Then they asked him, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" He answered, "I've told you this already, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too?" Then they hurled insults at him and said, "You are this fellow's disciple. We are disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses, but as for this fellow, we don't even know where he comes from." The man answered, "Now that is remarkable. You don't know where he comes from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners. He listens to the godly man who does his will. Nobody has ever heard of opening the eyes of the man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing." To this they replied, "You are steeped in sin at birth. How dare you lecture us?" And the Pharisees threw him out. One last time. Take a deep breath. All right. Verse 35. Jesus heard that they had thrown him out, and when he found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" "Who is he, sir?" the man asked. "Tell me so that I might believe in him." And Jesus said, "You have seen him. In fact, he is the one speaking with you." Then the man said, "Lord, I believe," and he worshiped him. Jesus said, "For judgment I have come into this world so that the blind will see, and those who see will become blind." That's what I told you earlier, right? Some Pharisees who were with him heard him say this and asked, "What? Are we blind too?" Jesus said, "If you were blind, you would not be guilty of sin. But now that you claim you can see, your guilt remains." This is the word of God for the people of God. And together we say, thanks be to God. Okay, obviously there's a lot going on here. I just want to point out a few things and then kind of get us to a main takeaway. And then if you're joining us online, I'm going to invite you. We're going to receive communion this morning as well. So I invite you to participate in that as a part of our response today. So what a story, right? So we understand a little bit of context. John 7 and 8 are a part of this narrative in John chapter 9. But just before this, John tells us that Jesus actually sent his disciples ahead of him down to Jerusalem. Jesus told them, "You guys go on down to the Feast of Tabernacles." They were doing this thing that they go often. They would go from where they're at in Galilee or up north down to the southern end of Israel. And so the disciples, Jesus actually sent them out ahead. And then Jesus sneaks into town after the disciples, right? He makes his way down to Jerusalem where a lot of Jews would have gathered, many of them similar to the Passover feast at the same time. This was, again, another way that the people of God just continue to remember God's faithfulness in the wilderness, in the desert. So they actually set up tents outside of the town and lived in those tents for a while. So Jesus sneaks into town, separate from his disciples, and spends a few days, and even his disciples start to notice he's there, and so they start to spend some time together. It's during this time when Jesus is teaching in the synagogue, or actually in the temple courts outside of the temple, with his disciples gathered and lots of other people who are around. This is when Jesus forgives the woman who's caught in adultery, kind of intervenes in this situation. And again, these are a couple of days in a row where Jesus is going out to the temple courts, and people are starting to follow and pay attention to this. And even the Pharisees, the religious leaders, are getting wind of this and understanding what's going on. So you can imagine they're on their guard. They're much more attentive. They're probably a little bit agitated by Jesus. They're trying to understand what's going on. So that's what brings us to this interaction in this particular moment. In fact, the religious leaders start to question some of the guards on the outside of the temple courts and begin to think that maybe they are following Jesus even too. So they're getting really suspicious of lots of people. We have to deal with something pretty big right from the start, though. If you'll recall, John wrote his gospel. The goal of John's gospel is clear at the very last verses, the very couple of last verses in John chapter 21. John is writing so that anyone who would hear this would believe that Jesus was and is the Son of God. So chapter 9 opens just like the last few days again, where Jesus and disciples are reunited. They're walking and making their way into the temple courts, or into the city actually, along the road. And then it's in this moment where one of the disciples asks a very big question of Jesus, right? "Rabbi, teacher, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" It's not an age-old question of which comes first, right? It's not like which comes first, the chicken or the egg, right? You've heard that question before. Has anyone ever figured that out? Yeah. The chicken or the egg? Yes. It's just yes. Is that the answer? Okay. In fact, this question, it's got to be the chicken. We can debate this. God made the chicken. Well, we can debate this one. It's on this question about who sinned, this question about sin actually is on the beginning pages of Scripture for us. Genesis chapter 2 and 3, there's this dialogue that's happening. It's an age-old question repeated all throughout Israel's history. Oftentimes it was the sin of the nation that brought their punishment. So this was not a new dialogue, a new curiosity for the disciples of Jesus and for the people probably around. And so then there was a way in which they were supposed to treat a person like this who was born blind. It was kind of expected or understood that maybe it was either his parents' fault or his fault that he was born blind. Now, that question is not an old question. It's actually a question that we still repeat even today. Many of you are too young for this, but for those of us who are old enough to remember September 11, 2001, I remember do you remember where you were at on that day and what happened? It was not long after that happened, like that day that I remember our pastor opening up the church and allowing some of my friends who were kind of seeking, asking questions, maybe to come for answers, have conversation about that or to pray about it, or maybe it was a bit of a response to just the fear around that. But within a few days, if you'll recall, there were a few prominent Christian leaders who began to blame those attacks on the sins of the nation. On the sins of the American people. Again, they were having this conversation. Whose fault is it? It's our fault, right? They were beginning to talk about that's why this happened. And then it was a few years after that, my brother, senior in high school, I remember this really well. Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, and some of those same prominent leaders came out again and said it's because of the sin and the lawlessness of the people of New Orleans that this hurricane, that this natural disaster, that God sent that, right? Wild, right? But again, this is something we as people constantly wrestle with. I think I did it too when I was a kid. I looked for how to place blame, right? In fact, I was sneaky. I was the older of 3 siblings. And so I often would blame my siblings for what happened in the car. I would look for someone to put the blame on. Tisk, thank you. I was always looking for someone to put the blame on. And then now I realize as a parent of 4 kids that it's oftentimes it is the oldest or the second. There's always an instigator. It's never the first one to cry wolf. I've gotten smarter. But notice Jesus' response, framing the entire story. There is some nuance to the translation. Even in the NIV kind of translates that a little bit differently. But there's this one word that's very clear that Jesus says, right, in response. Which is it, his parents or him? Who is it that sinned? Neither. Jesus is very clear about that. Neither. Like one word response shuts down the question. We're done. But actually, again, this is the part that needs some help getting translated. It's this next part of Jesus' response, and it's this that requires us to pause to understand the purpose statement here. So if you look at the screen, you'll see there's this place where we have to be intentional about how this is worded. Jesus says this, but so that the work of God might be displayed in his life. Pause. We must do the work of him who sent me while it's still day. I think this is either the NLT or the ESV translation, but this helps more than the NIV translation even. Again, but so that the work of God might be displayed in his life, pause. We must do the work of him who sent me while it is still day. That pause is not a period, it's a comma. So I need a volunteer to help me, all right? There's 2 tables and 2 in the sound booth. Okay, I need a volunteer to help me. Volunteers, will you raise your hand? Now listen, before you volunteer for this, very, very, very super important task, okay? Are you sure you're up for this? Can I trust you? Okay, this will, I need you to be willing to get into character here. There's a lot of pressure on this. Okay, if you're a volunteer, if you'll raise your hand. Who is our volunteers? I got 1 at one table. I got 2 at one table. I need 1. We'll go with Ruben. I need a volunteer at this table. Maddie, will you stand up? Okay, volunteers, if you'll stand up. I'm going to do something here. I need you to, if you're not a volunteer, I need you to close your eyes, okay? All right, I need you to close your eyes. Just trust me. I have a cup of dirt here that I'm going to give our volunteers to spit in. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I want you to think about it. I'm kidding. You can open your eyes. I was joking. Volunteers, you can sit down. I was kidding. I'm not going to actually have you do that. But imagine for just a moment that you're the blind person. Everybody close your eyes for just a minute, right? You're a blind person. You want to try? You'll let them try it? Do what? You're blind in one eye. All right, Mike needs some healing. We'll pray for that, okay? Well, but here's this thing. All right, so close your eyes for just a minute and think about, everybody, you're going to recognize this sound, right? For those online, you might turn your camera down or your stuff down. This sound. Like if you're blind and you hear this, Like, you know what's going on, right? Imagine the conversation that might have happened in this moment, right? The blind guy hears this sound, and he's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Was that spit? Like, hang on for just a minute. And you can hear this, like this sort of this little sound that's going on, right? You can imagine the moisture in the dirt that's kind of squishing around, and my wife is getting grossed out right now just thinking about that sound, right? Jesus is there mixing this dirt, and the blind guy, his senses are very aware of what's going on. Maybe he's even heard the conversation, but you hear this, and he's like, well, hang on a second. Like, Jesus, like, I don't even share a water bottle with my siblings, like the same straw. Like, was that spit? Okay, you can open your eyes if you have them closed still. I just want you to think about what are you thinking there in that moment? Like, Jesus is like here before the blind man offering this very luxurious spa treatment, right? Like, he's gonna like spit in the dirt with some mud and just kind of mix it around and rub it on this guy's eyes, and he just is there. Jesus takes the mud paste he's just made, again, the best spa treatment that anyone has ever had, and Jesus tells the man to go and to wash in the pool of Siloam. The end of verse 7 tells us the man did as Jesus said. He went, and then he came home seeing. Jesus, who was there when God, I think someone probably helped lead him to the pool. Pool of Siloam was actually a pretty big pool. They actually just recently discovered it in like 2005. It's underneath a Jewish home construction site where there's actually people like living and stuff. And so it's underneath that they've discovered this pool. And so they haven't like completely excavated the whole thing, but there's details about now where we know the location of it. So you have to imagine though that Jesus, again, this is a pointing back to Jesus was there when God created the universe, right? He was there when God created the man from what, Ellie? God created the man from dust, right? Yeah, from the dust. Jesus is there, again, when he's watching this dust and dirt also be broken, right, by sin in the garden. Jesus was there. And yet in this moment, he's going back to that dust, to the dirt, and a symbolism, maybe even a connection to that very beginning passage in the very beginning of the place where God did his work to display life. There's a connection we have to make there. Okay, so there's clearly a physical dimension of being able to see and not see, right? A physical dimension to his healing that happens here, but there's also a spiritual sense that happens underneath all of this. So in order to fully understand this man who's born blind, formerly blind, and his growing testimony, I think we need to look at 3 of the people groups. So I want to look at the 3 other kind of major groups of characters in this story with me. So hang on, because I want us to think about maybe we have become blind. Maybe we've become blind. Okay, so first the neighbors. This is verse 8. His neighbors and those who had formerly seen him begging asked, "Isn't this the same man who used to sit and beg?" Some claimed that he was. Others said, "No, he only looks like him." Now, I get if it's Judah and Asa, and you're like, maybe he kind of looks like him, maybe a little bit more when they were younger, but this guy is literally of age, so he's probably been here in this place begging for a while, and the neighbors are even debating, like maybe it's him, maybe it's not him, because this person's out of context, right? Have you ever been out of context? Have you ever seen someone out of context? Sarah, this happened to her just yesterday. Grayson's classmate had a birthday in Overland Park at Urban Air, and while Sarah's there, a little girl comes up to Sarah and hugs her. Okay? We're talking like a 7-year-old girl comes up and hugs Sarah, and the mom is standing there and goes, "I'm sorry, who are you?" Like, out of context, to which the little girl is like, "Oh, this is Miss Click. She's our substitute teacher." So in this moment, there's kind of an out of context, like, we're all the way in Overland Park. Why is my 7-year-old daughter hugging this stranger, right? If you've ever seen someone out of context, it happens often with us. Sarah and I will be at lunch or something. Even here in Lee Summit, it happens. And I'll go, "I know that person. Where do I know them from?" And Sarah loves it because she's like, knows we're going to play a game in just a minute. Like, we're going to try to figure out who this is. Is it someone from college? Is it someone from family? Is it a Nazarene person? Like, it happens way more than you would think, right? So maybe in this moment, the neighbors are debating this or trying to decide, is this the right person? Because they're seeing him out of context. He's in a place where he's never been before. He's doing something they've never seen him do before. Because you see, for the blind man, every day of his life, he was sitting along those same roads doing one thing. The scriptures told us, Ellie, what was the one thing the blind man was doing the whole time? His entire life. What was he there doing? Begging, right? He was begging. Huh? Yeah. Your mom's feeding her all the answers. That's what I was waiting for. Every single day, like, again, this man born blind just spends all of his day begging. And yet in this moment, the people in town walked right past him for years, moved right on past him. I'm sure over time they actually stopped noticing him. We talked about signs earlier. Like how often, again, when you're in a place when you're like, don't even recognize that sign was there. And yet that's probably in the same way the neighbors who, despite seeing, again, the neighbors who had sight were actually, maybe they were blind to the people in need around them. Perhaps we're like the neighbors. We have people around us who have physical needs, but we're blind to the people who need Jesus the most, or maybe even blind to the transformation that could happen in their lives. Maybe we're like the neighbors and we're blind. Maybe we're also a little bit like the second group. I'm going to skip over the Pharisees and go to the parents now. When the man was brought before the Pharisees, they said, let's go get his parents, and this will prove that this is the case, right? So his parents are brought before the Pharisees. Yes, we're talking like literally his actual mom and dad, the ones who gave birth to him. And again, he's of age at this point, so it means he was probably somewhere in his 20s. So they would have been the ones who were caring for him when he was little. So they say to him, yes, we know he is our son, and we know that he was born blind, but how he can see now, or who opened his eyes, we don't know. So ask him, because he is of age. And the scriptures even tell us that they're afraid to answer because they're afraid to be kicked out of the synagogue. To be of age, again, means that he's 20 years old. And again, no spit, I promise you, this time. But I want you to think about, again, how much he would have depended on his parents for everything. Like these are the people, again, who would have raised him up to some point when they would have then said, okay, it's time for you to move out of our home, and then he would have gone every day to beg. And in this moment, his parents are afraid to even ask, or maybe even afraid to answer the question that's asked of them. So maybe we're like the parents, and despite our seeing, we're blinded by our fear, right? Because our identity is at stake. Our allegiance, it's far too risky for us to be faithful to what we actually believe is true, so that it's hard for us to see the transformation in someone's life, because that would mean that we'd have to rethink who it is or how it is we think about God, right? We would risk the things we know, the things in our identity. Boy, that one hit home for me this week. I was thinking a lot about that. Maybe we're like the third group. Let's get straight to it. This group never gets much of a good reputation, right? The religious leaders, when it comes to their interactions with Jesus, this interaction is not much better than the ones in the past. When the Pharisees learned how this man received his sight, they began to interrogate the man born blind in a clear effort to discredit Jesus, or eventually just to discredit the man born blind. They're grasping at straws, if you will, which if you don't know what grasping at straw means, think about when you're in a pond, you're in a body of water, and you're drowning, and you can't reach the shore. You're actually reaching up for straw. And as you reach and try to grab, you're just reaching and grabbing for anything to help pull yourself ashore. That's the picture here. The Pharisees are reaching for everything to maintain their position. The Pharisees are certainly concerned with reconciling the miracle. Again, the goal is that they've seen a miracle. They're like, okay, the scriptures even say that they were divided on this. But they actually take a very different approach from the very start. They're like, okay, we're going to go after Jesus with this one, right? It's the Sabbath. Jesus healed on the Sabbath, which was against the law, against the rules. And not only did he heal, but he also made mud, which is actually pretty close to making bricks, so you're not allowed to do that. So that's two rules that Jesus broke on the Sabbath, right? It's wild to think about. Again, as I read about this, the commentators would have said, like, the religious leaders would have been really upset with not only that Jesus did it on the Sabbath, but that he was making mortar, if you will, like spitting in dirt, was too close to making the kind of thing you'd use to build a wall. So they question his testimony, which it seems like he'd be able to prove given the amount of witnesses, the people in the town who lived with him, who were near him, who walked by him. His parents were there. And the sheer fact that they see this man. Their effort to disprove Jesus goes even further, though. They try to discredit Jesus and the man, saying that they're both sinners. Even the man born blind can see that they're doing this. And after a few times of telling a story, my favorite line in there is when he turns to them and says, why? Do you want to become his disciples too? Like either out of ignorance or just out of spite. Like, well, why do you want to know? Like, do you want to be his disciples too? So maybe in our lives, maybe we're a lot like the religious leaders. But despite our seeing, we're blinded by the ways we think Jesus actually works or the way we've experienced him work in the past. So maybe like the religious leaders, we're blind to how Jesus actually works, or maybe even how we've only ever experienced him work in the past. The other fascinating thing happening here, other than being like the sight and blind piece, is this assertion of certitude. I'm going to use a big word. Certitude. I want to use the word, everybody say certitude. Maddie, you just learned a big word. Grayson, you learned a big word today. Certitude. And we're going to put the definition up on the screen so you know that it's a real word. Absolute certainty or a conviction that something is the case, something that someone firmly believes is true. When you have certitude, like you're positive and certain that you are right. In today's world, it can be hard to discern truth from AI. I feel like I'm at an advantage over lots of people who are older than me and people who are younger than me, because I've been around technology my whole life. So when I look at something, it doesn't take me long to figure out if this is AI, if this is fake, or if this is true, right? So I have a few things, not any images. I started to do some fun images, but I have some true or false things. So kids, you can play this game too, all right? I have a few true or false questions. The first thing, all right? If you swallow gum, it stays in your stomach for 7 years. True or false? False. We have one says false. Anybody here say true? You've been told your whole life. You have been told your whole life. I too was told my whole life. Okay. Okay, so listen closely. It is true that like corn or seeds, our stomachs don't contain the enzymes to break down the gum. But like corn or seeds, gum takes the same path and exits our body just like everything else that we eat. So that's false, despite the years of my parents telling me not to swallow my gum. So instead, when I would leave church on a Sunday, with my gum from church that had gotten gross, I would throw it up on the roof of the gym. Like, that was my goal every Sunday after church, was to take my gum and just to throw it up on the roof. So it wasn't in the grass or on the sidewalk. It would be up out of the way, repairing holes on top of the roof. Yes, exactly. Okay. All right, second thing. True or false, and my kids don't tell the answer to this. You cannot say the word Coca-Cola without your lips touching. True or false? Practice, try and say it. Coca-Cola. All right, so pause for just a minute. It is false. You can say it without your lips touching. You can say Coca-Cola without your lips touching. But when you think about it really intentionally, you look kind of funny, all right? Sorry, I got you with that one. You don't actually have to, like, focus. I know. Okay, true or false? I actually dunked a basketball on a 10-foot goal over a person, on top of a person, during a summer of pickup basketball. True or false? True or false? Some of you say maybe. You say true? Mike says false. I actually did. I've only ever dunked on one person in my life, and it was at Texas A&M on summer pickup ball, and there were guys who played in the league who were on the side watching the pickup game we were playing, and this story's not like played in the NBA. They were on the sideline watching, and I went up and dunked on a guy one game. Never, ever done it again in my life, and it only ever happened once. So it is crazy to think that actually happened. Okay, the last thing. The average length of the human tongue is the same length as your middle finger, 3 inches. The average length of the human tongue. True or false? Huh? True or false? false? The average length of the human tongue is the same length as your middle finger. Actually, your tongue, you can stretch, right? Your tongue will stretch, but your tongue relaxed is the same length as your middle finger. Does it? So what's your guess, true or false? It's actually true. The average human tongue is actually the same length as your middle finger. So it's actually 3 inches. The average human tongue is the length of your middle finger, 3 inches long. Okay, all of that nonsense aside. Okay. Right. The average. That's why I say the average. The average. The average. You can always use the average to get people in true or false games. Fun facts with Rob. Okay, so all that is to help us understand that truth requires us to reason using our 5 senses and a mix of our experiences, traditions, scripture for those who follow Jesus, right? Truth must be discerned. This would have put the man born blind at a disadvantage because he was left to trust those around him to determine what was true about the world. Because he was blind, not only did he not have his sight to corroborate truth, he would have missed out, yes, corroborate, he would have missed out on the potential for education that his friends and his peers went through, right? Compare that with the religious elite on the other side, again, who knew with certainty, right, who had certitude because they had access to manuscripts. They had the best teachers in all of Israel. We've talked about this before. They had spent years memorizing and learning the education that they went through in order to establish themselves as the authority on all things God. But what struck me about this story the most was how the Pharisees and the man born blind handled what was almost a reversal of the truth about their experience, right? The Pharisees go one direction about their experience, and the man born blind, his experience about truth goes the other direction. For the Pharisees, every interaction with the blind man, their grip on what is true is beginning to slip out of their grasp, right? They say things like, Jesus didn't keep the Sabbath, so he can't be from God. This man was not really born blind. Verse 24, they told him to give glory to God. So when he doesn't, they actually insult him, right? They call him a follower of Jesus, a Christian, a little Christ. And finally, deciding that he had never seen the miracle, that he actually never actually received the miracle, that it must not be true, it meant that he was a sinner, and they threw him out of the synagogue. They threw him outside of the community, right? So they had this reversal of what they believe is true, and then all of a sudden they're are grabbing on to anything and everything they can to kind of maintain that truth. On the other side, though, you have a man who's just experienced a miracle, and despite his neighbors and his parents and the Pharisees, his testimony, his retelling of what is true begins to grow and to really take shape. Verse 11, he retells the story. There was mud, then I washed, and I could see. I don't know where Jesus went after that. That's the beginning of his testimony. I was blind. There was mud, I washed, and then I see it. And I don't know where Jesus went. Speaking of Jesus in verse 17, Jesus is a prophet. And then verse 25, probably the most powerful one, the one we know the most, we hear the most. One thing I do know, whether he was a sinner or not, in reference to Jesus, I don't know. But one thing I do know, I was blind, and now I see. No one has ever, this is verse 32 and 33, no one has ever heard of the opening of the eyes of the blind, so he must be from God. So this blind man, his testimony is growing in this moment, right? While the Pharisees' grip on truth is shrinking. Despite the neighbors and his parents and his Pharisees and the Pharisees, all of these interrogations actually help him have more of an awareness of God and a diminishing light of God and a diminishing picture of God on the part of the Pharisees. Until we get to verse 39, and Jesus says this, "For judgment I have come." Again, this is where I started in the beginning. And this is where we'll kind of get ready to end. So be prepared, all right? "For judgment I have come into this world, so that the blind will see, and those who see will become blind." So let me ask you a question. What does this matter to us? All of this happened so that God, the work of God, might be displayed in him. Sometimes I wonder, for the man born blind, if he actually heard the disciples' question. Maybe not for the first time, but maybe lots of people have walked by and asked this same question. Who sinned? Was it his parents or was it him? So again, I wonder, for the man born blind, when he heard the disciples walk by, did he hear this question again, another time? And so we have to ask ourselves. Maybe he's wondering, did he know that God wanted to be on display in his life? Did he recognize in this moment when Jesus is coming in that this is an opportunity for God to display his works in him? Maybe he had lost hope. Maybe he was skeptical like the neighbors, blind to the transformation. Maybe he was like the parents, blinded by fear. Or maybe he was like the Pharisees, blinded to the way that God worked. So let me ask you, would your life be different if you knew God wanted to be at work would your life be different if you knew God wanted his work to be on display in you? This is the question I want us to wrestle with today as we prepare for communion. I want us to think about in each individual life in this room. Would your life be different if you knew God wanted his work to be on display in you? Because I believe that God does want his work to be on display in your life. So may we today be like the man who was born blind, when all we can do is beg because we're in need of healing. And when Jesus shows up, may our response be, Lord, I believe. And then may we worship.